So I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the City of Powell River Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, June 4th, 2024 to order, and recognize that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people who have lived here for many thousands of years. A couple of announcements. First off, I'm going to ask that everybody maintain an atmosphere of respect and tolerance at today's meeting. Allow other people to speak. Please refrain from clapping or booing or other demonstrations, and allow people to have the freedom to express their views as they would wish. We've got an announcement to make that there is, in addition to our live streaming of today's Committee of the Whole meeting, a collective of filmmakers who will be filming for a documentary owned by the Tla'amin Nation. Their goal is to cover any potential city discussions on the name change topic. If you have any questions regarding that, you can contact the producer, Davis McKenzie, at media@tn-bc.ca. Having said that, here we are at the time to adopt the agenda. Anybody have any additions to the agenda at all?
I'll move adoption.
The seconder, any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the agenda is circulated. That's carried. Into adoption of the minutes, and the next item is minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held May 14th, 2024. What's your pleasure, folks? Have a seconder? All those in favor of adopting those minutes is circulated. Any opposed? None. That's carried. And we are right into delegations. We have a number of delegations today. I'm going to ask everybody to watch the clock as we have the timer up on the screens and keep to the 10-minute time limit, please. The first is Cathy Korolek from Powell River Community Response Network regarding World Elder Abuse Day, Abuse Awareness Day.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me speak today. I am Cathy Korolek, and I am representing on behalf of the Powell River Response Network or the CRN. I'm only 1 week in as chair, so I'm learning quickly about this organization. A couple of years ago, while in Grand Forks City Council, I had the opportunity to participate in a seminar with regards to seniors. I decided to enroll thinking it would be interesting, or on the other hand, if it was boring, I could jump over to the Climate Change Committee. Well, however, it was anything but boring. I stayed for the full 2 days, and at the end, wanted to know how I could volunteer to get involved. I don't believe we know the extent of abuse of seniors at all. So I am here to present on behalf of this network, and it is very important. And at the end, I have a request of the Mayor and Council. So about the Powell River Community Response Network, or the CRN, it's one of about 80 CRNs in the province that are members of the BC Community Response Network. Our CRN is made up of a diverse group of community agencies, government agencies, health professionals, and individuals who are committed in educating the community about adult abuse. The 7 most common types of elderly abuse can include physical abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, self-neglect, and abandonment. Any of these elder abuse types can be devastating to older people and their families. On February 11, 2019, a meeting was held in Powell River to assess the need for a CRN to address the issue of senior abuse in our community. The meeting was attended by representatives from local government agencies and not-for-profit organizations. At the conclusion of the meeting, a consensus was reached to begin the development of a new CRN in Powell River. In 2010, Powell River's CRN folded because of the lack of community support. The BC Community Response Network requires each CRN to have a host institution. So now Powell River Senior Citizens Branch, number 49, is our host institution. The first initiative of the Powell River Assist was to jointly host with the Powell River Recreation Complex Seniors Together program, a training program on how to spot adult abuse entitled It's Not Right. 82 attended the event on February 20th, 2020, which included discussions on the ageism, the signs and risk factors of senior abuse, and things that are required to make a community safe for all our senior population. April Struthers is our regional BC CRN mentor, led the presentation, which was reported on the March 3rd, 2020 edition of the Powell River Peak by Paul Galinsky. On March 12, 2020, Powell River Assist hired a coordinator, Lisa Lamacraft, who remains in the position today. Since then, April, our regional mentor, made 4 additional of It's Not Right presentations in our community at Gary Gray Place and the Cranberry Senior Center. It is our goal to present to Lang Bay and Texada Island communities in the fall of this year. According to the Office of BC Seniors Advocate, approximately 1 in 6 people aged 60 years or older experience some form of abuse in the community settings. And this is predicted to increase as countless experience rapidly aging populations. Many seniors and or families turn to multiple organizations to seek help, which can include community response networks, provincial health authorities, home and community care, local RCMP, and the public guardian and trustees. According to the 2021 census at that time, 31.6% of Powell River Regional District residents are aged 65 and older, with an additional 10.4% between the ages of 60 and 64 years of age, totaling approximately 8,945 senior residents. And for that matter, the seniors population in Canada has outgrown the youth population. So they hold the balance of power in that particular area. So it's something to keep in mind when people are out and about. We need to understand abuse is as a larger social issue. Individuals who work in this field have been reported as saying we are only seeing the tip of an iceberg in the reported numbers of abuse. Therefore, it is likely that we each know a person who has been abused or is currently suffering abuse. It's good to educate the community on knowing the trends of abuse. Expect, for example, that one kind of abuse may possibly be linked to another. Recognize that where power imbalance exists, the possibility of abuse exists. Understand the power of long-term abusive relationships to erode a person's judgment, ability to seek help, or escape. Understand that because of the variability of the situations, until responding agencies have had the time to evaluate, to look at things closely, we can make no assumptions about what is going on and why. Careful exploration and support over these issues are the next step in preventing all the senior abuse that's going on. And it's really important because we don't really know what's happening to seniors. Many aren't out and about that much. We don't know what's going on at home. And if we do have a suspicion, it's important to report it. And there, you can report it to the hospital. There is a group there that called React, and they will respond. It's not our responsibility to investigate, but to refer. So today, this is what we're asking of Mayor and Council. The proclamation of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Whereas Powell River seniors are valued members of society, convey a wealth of experience and wisdom in our community, and deserve to live with dignity and respect. It is our collective responsibility to ensure they live safely and fully in a community that cares about them. Whereas victims of elder abuse are parents, grandparents, neighbors, and friends. Elder abuse is not limited by race, gender, culture, and circumstance. And whether physical, emotional, or financial, elder abuse takes an unacceptable toll on individuals and families. Whereas seniors who experience abuse or neglect fight a heightened lack of health-related complications. Financial abuse can rob our seniors of the security they have built over a lifetime. Tragically, many older adults suffer in silence, burdened by fear, shame, or impairments that prevent them from speaking out about abuse. Whereas combating abuse of older adults will help improve the quality of life for all seniors in our community and allow seniors to continue to live as independently as possible and contribute to the life and vibrancy of Powell River. Whereas Powell River seniors are guaranteed that they will be treated with respect and dignity to enable them to continue to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and important and active members of this community. Whereas the well-being of Powell River seniors is in the interest of all and further adds to the well-being of the Powell River. In conclusion, we would like the Mayor and Council to proclaim June 15th, 2024 as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and encourage all residents to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of our seniors. So thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on your precision.
Well, you know how volunteers go along, right?
Many people totally fitted into the 10 minutes, so thank you for doing that.
Pleasure.
Any comments from council? Mr.
Yes.
Mayor.
Thank you very much, Cathy. Probably know I was the first chair when we restarted the CRN.
Yes.
And just to give people a little more idea of some of the issues that we've dealt with. We had one gentleman who his neighbors observed started looking like he was living in his car. And what had happened was that his grandson and girlfriend had moved into the house. Initially, they were in the basement. Next thing you know, they were in the main bedroom and he was in the basement. And then he was suffering so much abuse that the only way he could escape would be to go into his car. So in working with the neighbors and a number of support organizations, we managed to resolve that. And as a consequence, what we did was we made up little poster cards that we sent out to every house in Powell River. And on that, it listed all of the resources that are available if you are suffering abuse or if you see somebody within the community. So I've still got a few of those and I'll pass them on to you because maybe it's time that we sent those out again. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Alameda.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Ms. Korolek for coming. And if you hadn't looked at the schedule for Thursday, we do have that on the schedule for Thursday for the, sorry, I forgot the name. Proclamation. Thank you very much.
Councilor Southcott.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Korolek. I think that probably one of the most profound factors that allows abuse to occur is isolation and disconnectedness between us. So I'm wondering if your organization has any connections to perhaps Block Watch or has considered encouraging the city to get back into block parties. I know well, my experience with block parties was that it really brought communities together and people learned who was in their neighborhood sometimes that they didn't even know. So, and in my past in healthcare, I'm totally convinced that this is the kind of activity that then intervenes in situations like that, not only recognizing them, but also sometimes finding solutions that relate to community and the people immediately around.
So with that in mind, I understand that block parties are being encouraged this year in various areas. So I think that is a good idea to be doing that. And honestly, I'm only 1 week in this job. So there's only so much I know and I'm learning, but we're going forward.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if you've had the opportunity to, you're a week in, but have explored opportunities for relationship with Cathy Safe, given the access to information and supports and relationships with the province and RCMP, and given that they have staffing, not that they have an abundance of time and money, but I'm just wondering if there's opportunities for collaboration there, given their focus on preventing violence and working with families who are experiencing abuse of different levels.
Well, in response to that, I think it would take some discussion and more knowledge on both sides of things, and to say, yes, absolutely. I don't know, because I'm not in a position to commit to that at this point.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a commitment, just curious if that had come up yet.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to the proclamation on Thursday.
And thank you very much.
Well, the next delegation is Julie Jenkins from Lift Community Service about the homelessness services update.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you again. Thank you for having me today. And I just wanted to start by thanking Cathy for your presentation. I had the opportunity when I first moved to the community to work with United Way and with the Powell River Senior Center and Powell River Assist a bit, and am just so convinced of the important work that your organization is doing in the community. So thank you. My name is Julie Jenkins. I'm the Housing Services Manager at Lyft, and I'm starting this presentation with some trepidation about my timing. So I'll try my best to stay within the 10 minutes. I'm here today to provide a bit of an update on homelessness services in Cathy and the Cathy Emergency Shelter. So I last was here in December when we were talking about the need for extreme weather response services in our community. And I'm hoping to report back on what this winter has been like at the shelter, as well as a few announcements for some new initiatives that are starting up. So I'll start with an update on the emergency shelter and on the extreme weather response shelter, which operated this winter, as well as some of our good neighbor commitments that we had discussed at length over the winter. And then I will share some announcements around the point-in-time homeless count, the CBC HP program, which is a rent supplement program that's expanding, as well as the homelessness task force. So as you all are aware, the emergency shelter at 4746 Joyce Avenue opened in January 2022. So it's been open for 2.5 years now at that location. We offer an immediate space for adults experiencing homelessness to stay overnight and connect with health, housing, and social services. The shelter currently offers 24-hour service, 20 beds, separate rooms for men and women, secure lockers, a hot dinner and breakfast, and low barrier services. So what that means is that our contract is intended to allow people to access shelter services without too many preconditions, knowing that the complexities of our unhoused population in Cathy and around the province often mean that people are coming in active substance use, with concurrent mental health conditions, and maybe with belongings that they have on them and other challenges that they're bringing into that space. So we're balancing offering low barrier services with operating in an urban area, and the obligations, of course, that we have to our neighbors and our wider community. I I'm sharing some statistics today from the December 1st to May 31st period around shelter use. And actually our occupancy at the shelter has been down slightly since the same period last year. So between December and May of this year, we had 2,944 total stays. 65% of those stays were from men and 31% from women, 1% with people with other gender identities and 3% undisclosed. There were 72 unique guests this year in the last 6 months, and average occupancy was 80%. We were full 9.3% of nights. And so that's an average over that period. The trends that we notice are that when the weather is bad, we tend to be full. When the weather gets nice, people tend to stay outside and have a bit of a break from the shelter and tend to kind of come back and forth. Last year in that same period, you'll see the numbers. I won't go through them one by one, but our total stays was slightly higher, about the same split of men and women, slight difference. 98 unique guests, so pretty significantly higher number of unique guests in that 6-month period last year. Our average occupancy was 97% between December and May 2022 to 2023, and we were full 58% of nights. I'm sure I'll get questions about why that is. I have a few theories, but nothing's verified, so we're kind of talking about this right now. One thing that we do track with shelter guests is kind of what happens when they leave the shelter when we can. And so we do know that some individuals who had been staying at the shelter for a long period of time were able to find long-term housing this year or move into treatment facilities, detox and treatment. I think that accounted for a significant number of people who had kind of been staying at the shelter long-term who were able to get housed this year. Another impact here is that prompted by some of the conversations that we had with councils and neighbors last year, we have kind of toughened up on rules or for who is allowed to stay at the shelter. And I think that has also contributed to people's desire to stay at the shelter and their kind of ability to want to comply with some of those expectations, as well as having longer term service restrictions for some people who were not able to comply with the expectations there. So I think my final thought on that is we're not seeing necessarily a drop in homelessness, but we are seeing a slight decrease in shelter use this winter. I was standing in these chambers last winter, also sharing the need for an extreme weather response shelter. We did open that shelter in January 2024 to provide temporary shelter beds in the CRC only when extreme weather conditions indicated it, and we expected the regular shelter would be full. The hours were 8:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. We had cots and blankets for folks set up with a room divider to separate men and women. We had some secure belongings storage in the front that was monitored by staff, hot dinner and cold breakfast served, bus passes provided, and lots of community donations were dropped by during that period. You'll see a picture of it up on the screen there. That was our setup. We opened a total of 8 nights over the winter, so it wasn't a long night, but it was during that period that it was extremely cold. During that period, we had a total of 22 stays over those 8 nights. The busiest night had 6 guests. The quietest night had 1 guest. There were 17 male stays, 5 female stays, 12 Indigenous stays. The coldest night was -11, and I remember that night because I had to come in quite early in the morning to help staff with takedown, and I remember in the parking lot the -11 on the dash in my car and thinking how grateful I was that that service was open that night. The best dinner by far voted was ham and pea soup, which has now become a regular in our rotation of dinners that's offered at the shelter in supportive housing. Of course, a big conversation that came up last winter when we were talking about the need for extreme weather response was how to balance offering these services in their location with neighbors close by. And I wanted to share some improvements or efforts that we've been able to make in collaboration with our funders and our neighbors in the RCMP since we talked in December. All staff were retrained on permit obligations, crisis intervention, the Good Neighbor Agreement, and daily suite protocols prompted by some of those conversations and in council. And the feedback that we received from our neighbors on both sides was that there's been a significant improvement in that time. We also moved to stricter enforcement of site rules based on some of that feedback. A meeting was held with our senior executive and the RCMP, the city, and BC Housing to discuss security solutions. And what we learned from that conversation is that BC Housing is not funding security for shelters or supportive housing, and that's based on their evidence base right now. So what they're recommending actually is to increase staffing at sites and to try to manage those concerns through increased baseline staffing. So we do have a proposal into BC Housing right now to increase baseline staffing at the shelter, and we've been promised that we'll hear back very soon about that. We built a new fence. You've probably seen it. It's shiny and beautiful. It goes all along Dr. Varma's property line between the dentist office and Canadian Tire, and halfway in the area that fire and the city permitted on the other side, and that's really prevented the flow of pedestrian traffic between the mall and our services, and has cut down on some of the loitering issues that we saw there. And that was funded by BC Housing. There are, of course, some ongoing challenges that we're having. Those are two of our staff inside the shelter on the picture there. Co-located services at the site are increasingly busy. So I've shared that the shelter has been a bit quieter this year, but the OPS and the CRC have been extremely busy. I was looking at my most recent data from the overdose prevention site, and we've been having days recently with upwards of 220 daily visits to the overdose prevention site, which is a great success for those services in our community and our community's efforts to tackle the toxic drug crisis, but of course brings a lot of traffic to that site during the day. The Community Resource Center as well. Drop-in spaces needed outside of CRC hours. So the Community Resource Center is open 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. We do notice a lot of people who don't have anywhere else to go being attracted to that site outside of those hours because they feel safe there, and having to manage the flow of people on the property is an ongoing challenge. Complexity of needs is increasing for folks. People have been homeless for a long time. The insufficient mental health emergency services, especially after hours and on the weekends. Public bathrooms and garbages are ongoing needs in that area, not just for our clients, but for lots of folks in that busy part of town. And we've had ongoing staffing pressures as well, so which contribute sometimes to our capacity to just have enough folks on site.
Oh, Ms. Jenkins, I see you're at the end of your time. How much longer do you think?
I'll buzz through this quickly. That was the bulk of my update, if that's okay with you.
To wrap up inside 2 minutes?
And I can do that, yes.
If council's okay with that, I'll give you an additional 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm sure you may have seen the article in the Peak that there is no point-in-time homeless count happening this year. That was a provincial decision that they're not funding the provincially funded counts didn't go ahead this year. So that's why you didn't see it happening here in Cathet. We're committed to participating in the next provincial count when it happens, and we're hopeful that that will be next year. But the result of that is that we don't have updated data for our community this year. As you'll recall, last year in the 2023 count, 126 people were identified as experiencing homelessness. 80% had been experiencing homelessness for more than 1 year. 90% had been here for more than a year. So I know the rumor mill in Powell River has started up again recently in the last couple of weeks that we're busing people in, that people are coming from Powell River. That's simply not the case. 90% of the people experiencing homelessness, according to that count, had been here for more than a year. 85% for more than 5 years, and 54% grew up here. 41% cited lack of income as a reason for losing housing, and the full report for that's available online. I do have an exciting announcement to share, which is that we've recently received a contract for 35 new rent subsidies for Cathet households through the Canada BC Housing Benefit, and that will increase 14 existing subsidies that date back to early COVID times. Those rent subsidies are targeted for households at risk of or experiencing homelessness who are in housing need and who have a month-to-month place to rent available to them. It's a referral-based program, so the idea is that service providers would bring forward individuals who are eligible for the program, and we would rapidly get those subsidies out to people in need in order to prevent homelessness or help them remain housed. Or if someone's experiencing homelessness and is able to attain a rental, that we could do that rapidly for them. So we have a meeting scheduled with local service providers next week to discuss priority populations and hope to allocate those subsidies by the end of summer. And I know that program makes a major difference for folks. In terms of next steps, this is really just an update. We don't have an ask today. I don't have anything super juicy to share, except that we're having ongoing meetings with partners about short and long-term solutions to the ongoing need for homelessness services in our community. And long-term housing really is what's needed. And I would emphasize that shelters are short-term solutions, and we see much better outcomes for people when they're moved into permanent housing. But in the meantime, shelters are what we have, and we're trying our best to work with partners to make them successful in our community. I'm happy to share that the first meeting of the Homelessness Task Force is happening next week to address some of the issues, challenges, and opportunities related to homelessness that our community is experiencing. So I believe municipal partners, RCMP, LIFT, and the Health Authority are coming together next week for some scoping conversations, and we'll be moving that project forward as well as a vehicle to address some of these concerns. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the extra 2 minutes.
Comments, Council? Blair Isaacson.
Just one question. For the rent subsidy, I forget the exact phrase. You mentioned working with service providers for referrals. Do you think you will have sufficient referrals among those service providers, or would you be looking for referrals from people that may not already be accessing services, or like would those people even exist in your view?
It's an interesting question. And so I've been talking to BC Housing about this because it is a referral-based program. And of course, there's questions about equity in that. I think that's a pragmatic decision that has been made for this program because of course, you want those rent subsidies to be allocated to people quickly and who are going to be successful in marketplace housing. So they're not appropriate for everyone. It's not a low barrier program necessarily. I expect that we will have more than sufficient referrals from the service providers who are coming together. And we're having kind of a two-part meeting next week. So the first part is a bit of an info session about that program. And the second part is a community conversation to determine how are we going to prioritize referrals if we get too many. And I expect that we'll get way more than too many just from the number of phone calls I get every week, the number of people walking into my office in housing need. And it's really difficult for renters out there right now. The nice thing about this program is that it is a higher amount for families with children, and it's a perpetual portable rent subsidy. So if someone has a rental right now and they move into a different location or even into a different type of housing, as long as it's still eligible, they can keep that subsidy perpetually. So it makes a big difference for folks in need.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins, for coming here and talking about the homelessness and bringing us up to date on the shelters. So you mentioned that our statistics for use of the shelters are lower this winter than the previous winter. Did we have an emergency, the emergency cold weather, extreme cold weather shelter? Did we have one of those the previous winter as well?
We didn't. And so we did this year and we didn't. I don't think that impacts the shelter use numbers because it was only open for 8 nights.
Yeah. Okay. And then I also had a question also about the rental subsidy program. There are rental subsidy programs you can apply for online, and they're you're eligible if you're not receiving social assistance of any other kind. My question was, is this separate from that program, or is it part and parcel the same?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is separate from that program, and it's designed to be a program that is people who are not eligible for other rent subsidies would be eligible for this subsidy. So if you're already on SAFER or already on a RAP subsidy, you're not eligible for the CBCHB subsidy. However, if you're on income assistance or people with disabilities or any of those other types of social assistance, you are still eligible for a rent subsidy. And the way that the calculation works is it would close the gap between the portion, the rental portion from your income assistance or your people with disability and your rent to a maximum of $900 for a single person and a bit higher for families or people with dependents. So it's quite significant for people.
Yeah, because the shelter provisions for social assistance are just really, really, really small compared to what actual rents are, for sure.
So for example, if your rent was $900, your shelter portion is
$345.
Yeah, exactly. And so your rent supplement would be $500 and whatever to close the gap so that your rent is covered.
And then you can still eat.
And you can buy groceries, exactly.
Okay, the homelessness task force that's meeting next week, do you have a date or a time for that?
It's, I think, staff who are meeting next week, and then we'll come back with a report around what that group is going to look like.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baum.
Through the chair, Ms. Jenkins, I want to thank you for your presentation. They're always thoughtful, they're always informative, and the numbers decreasing this May to December through May period. You forward that to the weather conditions or your rules that were newly implemented?
I think there are a number of factors kind of converging on, so weather conditions possibly because it is an average, right? Rules that possibly, or even that people choose to stay kind of half the time and have somewhere to couch surf or maybe a friend to stay with kind of half the week. That's a lot of the people in the shelter kind of will go back and forth between camping for a few nights, staying at the shelter for a few nights, staying with a friend for a few nights, not overstaying their welcome. And so people might lean more on some of those other resources depending on how things are going. We did have to put in place a few longer term service restrictions this winter based on violations of the Good Neighbor Agreement that may also have impacted those numbers.
My last question is in terms of the overall area business. I've heard a lot of complaints. Tell us how the fencing situation and why we haven't heard
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I'm glad to hear that. We built the fencing in consultation with Dr. Varma, whose family owns that dentist right next door to us, and had the police advise on it as well in terms of best practices for security. And so I think a common trend that we were seeing is people kind of spilling over from our property into Dr. Varma's property or using his kind of back parking lot as a road, a pedestrian road, to get to other places that they were going in the community. So the fence has made that not possible. It forces people to walk down to Joyce and around. It also, I believe, connects it like with a T with his building, so you can no longer walk easily along the other side of his building where there are quite a few areas to hide, and it was often a good place for people who to camp out for a little bit or hang out from their perspective, but of course from our neighbors' perspective that was not a welcome activity. So it's cut down on that significantly. I think also we've just been making sure that staff are outside, that they're moving people along. We've been re-educating people on the Good Neighbor Agreement, making sure that those sweeps are happening hourly, and I think it's working. So I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation. It is good to stay in touch with your business. When I was a paramedic, particularly during a number of years where I worked in an area where there was a population very similar to the population that you're serving, that was downtown Vancouver. It looks a lot like that here in some ways now, but that was 25 years ago for me. ambulance I would say the average number of calls where the acute complaint was psychiatric or mental health was probably at least a third, and sometimes over 50%, during periods of time. So I have to ask if you mentioned challenge services for emergency mental health response. Does BCEHS, the ambulance, not provide that? I know that it was inadequate when I was involved. And so the area that I worked in attracted people who could do that. And I realize there's that factor, but how is it working out here? Can you rely on ambulance to help you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We do rely on emergency services to help with mental health emergencies. So that would be ambulance and our CMP as well. And then Vancouver Coastal Health runs mental health emergency services, I think 8 to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. So there's also an outreach nurse, I believe, from VCH who will come provide that service. And we work closely with the intensive case management team at VCH as well for people on their caseload. I think what we're missing in our community is like a dedicated peer-assisted support or trained, something like CAR 52 in Vancouver, where a social worker or someone and a peer or someone with more advanced training could assist on those calls, because our services are stretched, as you know, ambulance included. I think everyone's really trying their best and they do fill those gaps, but there's a definite void of mental health services in our community for folks, and we feel that in our programs.
Just one small comment. Studies that I read back then indicated data showed that there were double the mental health calls and visits to emergency departments in hospitals after midnight. So it's interesting. I certainly am grateful that there's a 8 to 4 mental health emergency service, but even numbers that have been done over many years show that often the need is not 8 to 4. Possibly far more outside those hours. Anyway, just a comment. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. And I think that's exactly the point, right? As people, we don't choose when we're in crisis, and often it's not when it's convenient for the services that are open.
Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned, Julie, that some of the drop in unique guest numbers were those that had maybe found accommodations from this year to last, which is great. I was curious, I guess, from the 98 to 72 unique guests, if you knew how many of the 72 were unique to this year as opposed to and had not visited in a prior year, which is a number you might not have tracked. But
that's an interesting question. I think that our database is sophisticated enough to pull it, but I can't promise that. We could definitely calculate that manually pretty easily from our files, and I can get back to you.
There was no.
Thank you. I would like to congratulate you on finding a solution to Dr. Varma's issues. There are thousands of patients of Dr. Varma and his team that would have to go to the island or other places if that hadn't been resolved. So thank you very much.
I think that's everybody. So I'm going to say thanks for coming and keeping us updated on what you're doing. It's an important service to the community. So thank you and everyone who's involved in doing the work.
Thank you so much.
That brings us to our next delegation for tonight, Claudia Medina, regarding suggestions for reorienting the work of reconciliation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak, and thank you for the previous delegates for the really important information they shared. I'm here as an individual, community member, and I'm not representing any group in particular. However, I do know that my words today reflect the feelings of many people I know here. One of the main reasons that I was compelled to come and speak today is because I've heard that Previous delegations have said a lot about the rights of being, quote, born and raised here, implying that those who aren't, including those in governance, have limited rights to have a say in what happens here. And I'd like to address this and offer another perspective by saying that rather than giving me more rights as someone who was born and raised here, this actually heightens my responsibility to this beautiful region, which is fundamentally Tla'amin territory. So a bit of background on myself. I was born in the old hospital that was built on the lands that has also been known as T-Squat or Wide River. For most of my life living in this town, I only knew it as the Townsite, the original town where the mill was built and the dam was built. My parents moved to this country in the late 60s. My father worked in the mill for over 30 years, providing for his family. My grandfather also worked in the mill for a time in the dreaded grinder room, sending money home back to his home and family in Italy. I also worked in that mill as a summer student, which helped me get through university. Growing up, I didn't learn anything about the story about what was there before the mill. It was as if the mill had just magically appeared and the town was born. Throughout my experience at elementary and high school, there was little to no mention about the thousands of years of history, culture, language of the Tla'amin people, and most definitely nothing about the ongoing history of systemic colonization through government policy. We didn't learn anything about residential school. We didn't learn why the town was named Powell River or who even Powell was. I did, however, grow up feeling there was a kind of unspoken segregation, and it wasn't until much later that I learned that segregation was an actual enacted policy here. It wasn't until I moved back to this community in 2010 that I started to learn the full story of how the mill came to be, the process of expropriation of the Tla'amin lands that came to be known as Lot 450, the resistance to this expropriation, the relentless and ongoing policies that attempted to erase Tla'amin culture, and the systemic attempts to hide this history from the collective minds of people here. Learning this does not in any way erase my history here. Learning this does not erase or undermine the history of my family. However, learning about this history and the harms and injustice caused by the establishment of the mill in the town does give me a responsibility, which is to learn from the truth of the past and find ways to healing and rebuilding relationships and doing whatever possible to address the wrongs of the past through meaningful action. This is the essence of reconciliation. For myself and others, being born and raised here means being committed to reconciliation with the Tla'amin Nation, not only as those from other delegations have expressed. It doesn't give you the right to deny the truth or reinforce the harms of colonization. I also feel it's important to highlight that no matter how recently one has come to live here, as members of this community, we all have something to offer and contribute to this place, and we all have so much to learn. With regards to the statements made by previous delegations representing the, quote, concerned citizens, unquote, I feel it's necessary to emphasize that despite the constant refrain of this small group that they are speaking on behalf of the citizens of this town, myself and many others do not include ourselves in their fearful and negative rhetoric that has only been intensifying. Myself and many others have been shocked and appalled at witnessing the hateful rhetoric from these groups, or this group, I should say, that has been allowed to poison the council chambers, from outright lies to attempt to dismiss the years of work done by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and downplay the horrendous impacts of residential schools, to bluntly stating that they have no interest in any kind of relationship with the Tla'amin community. In my work as a filmmaker, I've been trusted to record the stories of residential school survivors. And when I think of their enormous courage in wanting to share what they endured, the unfathomable generosity of spirit to relive their traumas so that people can understand the truth of what happened, it sickens me to hear people stand up in these chambers and attempt to justify or downplay one of the most shameful chapters of this country's history. and on top of that, to claim to speak on behalf of the citizens of this community. With regards to the name change request, myself and many other community members have understood this to be an invitation to finally learn the truth of how colonial policies and systems have impacted and attempted to erase Tla'amin culture and undermine the rights of the Tla'amin people. With this invitation, I see the possibility of deepening a connection to this place, as the invitation offers also an insight into the thousands of years of rich and complex history, a story that continues and is flourishing despite the attempts to erase it. It's an invitation to heal, to strengthen relationships, to build on the work that has been done already. Nothing about this invitation is intended to erase our own individual stories or identities here. As someone who's been documenting the process since the request was made, I can say that engagement sessions were intended to educate and begin the process of telling the real story of this territory from the perspective of the Tla'amin people. As far as I know, it was the first time that people were coming together in a public forum to learn this history. It was clear, though, that even though many people demonstrated their interest and desire to learn, a small group of people from the beginning were vehemently opposed to learning anything about the reasons for the name change request, and increased their vocal opposition to reconciliation work in general. I firmly believe that tensions and divisions constantly being referred to by this group have been created through their refusal to acknowledge and learn the real colonial history of this town, which was presented clearly and thoroughly at each session. And this is reflected in the attempt to create an opinion poll that does not address the core reasons for the request, a request that requires learning the colonial history of the city from the perspective of the Tla'amin people. What really struck me was the open microphone sessions. While a minority spoke against the idea of a name change, most people stood up and bravely spoke from their heart about what they hoped we could accomplish together. It was the first time I'd ever witnessed a community forum of people speaking to the work of reconciliation in this way, a way that went beyond performativity and actually spoke about personal and collective responsibility and actions. It felt, and it still feels, like the request comes at an incredibly critical and opportune time when we as a whole community are being asked to consider who we are beyond the economic engine of the mill and how we will confront the converging crises of climate change and economic uncertainty. The Tla'amin Nation has been working hard to confront these crises, and through their work have created a lot of economic benefit for the city as a whole, a fact that the concerned citizen group delegates seem not to be aware of or choose to ignore. So I want to propose a reconciliation reset and a reminder that the Community Accord, established 21 years ago, came out of conflict and eventually collaboration. This was the result of leadership and the willingness on the part of the mayor and council at the time to listen and learn. The Community Accord was intended to be a living document, to continue to evolve as the realities facing the city changed. It is a foundation on which to build on. Like the work of reconciliation, it is in the beginning chapters and it is ongoing. This collaboration is the key to the well-being of everyone here and should not be derailed by a small group opposed to this work. So the current conflict that has arisen can and should be an opportunity for strong leadership to remind us what the core values of reconciliation are and initiate actions that reflect the values of UNDRIP, DRIPA, and the 94 calls to action that came about through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, only 11 of which have been completed to date. Of particular importance, I believe it's imperative to implement the recommendations from the Joint Working Group. I feel like I would like to read them out because I feel like we need to remember them and refer to them. It looks like I might not have enough time, but I will attempt to do so. Number one, that additional public education and community engagement activities be planned on issues of shared values, history, and reconciliation. Number two, that engagement activities be targeted to underreached demographics. Number three, that future engagement on the name change be designed to maximize the safety of all participants. Number four, that the city make reconciliation and relations with the Tla'amin Nation a strategic priority. Number five, that Tla'amin Nation develop a set of educational materials describing what they want their neighbors throughout the Catholic region to know about them, and that the city include this information in training for city staff and leadership.
I assume you're going to read the 11 and it'll take a few more seconds.
It will take a few more seconds if that's okay.
Go ahead if you can wrap it up fairly quickly.
Thank you. That the city, the Tla'amin Nation, and Catholic Regional District, through this community to community C3 process, establish a reconciliation committee mandated and resourced to advance reconciliation throughout the city and regional district. That the city establish staff positions to support the implementation of recommendations in this report and maintain positive, reciprocal relationships with the Tla'amin Nation and other Indigenous residents throughout Catholic region. That the public information and engagement events for various ages, groups, and in a range of formats be undertaken to better understand racism and colonialism and promote action to achieve racial equity. That ceremonial efforts be undertaken to reject all forms of racism and support healing and unification amongst all residents of the Catholic region. That additional community engagement and activities be planned on issues of shared values, history, and reconciliation as the basis for identifying options for a new name for the city. That a referendum or assent voting process is one of many available tools to engage public opinion. It is not the appropriate tool to utilize at this moment. A possible assent voting process and topic should only be carefully considered after implementing the recommendations of this report. And so I read those because I feel like it's important to remember them and acknowledge them, and they're very well-designed tools to move forward. And I also wanted to add that it's time to get back on track and return to the spirit of the work that turned the conflict into opportunities for learning with the community accord, sharing and moving forward in a way that does not deny the truth, but acknowledges the full story of what has transpired in this region, the painful injustices, as well as the incredibly rich and complex history of the Tla'amin people that continues to this day. I've added some links for more added information in my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Council. Any comments? Councillor Southcott.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think we've done one of the 11 recommendations, and that is include language in the strategic priorities for council that we only agreed on officially just within the last few months. I have found it dismaying that I can't call it a conversation, but the monologues going on in our community have been divisive and the antithesis to working together, finding a way forward together, in spite of factors that you mentioned, plus looming economic factors for this community. It's just gobsmacking to me that isn't, it appears not to be more deeply appreciated. Although that wouldn't be the principal motivation for me. So my question to you is, and I've asked myself this question over and over again, the city has apparently failed to convene any further actual work in our community that would advance the 11 recommendations. We do have our first two points of our strategic priorities. We haven't started on that yet. And my question is, do you have any specific suggestions for what might be able to be done in this community to advance this work, to working together?
First and foremost, I would say, thank you for your question, that it's making it a priority, really, recognizing that this is critical work that needs to be done, and that there has been work that began. As I mentioned in the engagement sessions, it was quite moving to see people coming together finally, in the first time that I've ever experienced living here, growing up here, people actually addressing what really happened here and what learning from it. And I think that started something that could have expanded and needs to expand. And so I feel like one of the recommendations was to continue those kinds of engagement sessions. I'm not saying it was clear there were certain people that did not want to learn, but I think, and I believe the majority of people do. And so when I looked around those rooms and I saw people absorbing information, I saw people asking questions, I saw people being brave and standing up at a microphone to express themselves, it seemed very clear to me that people want to do this work. It requires some leadership to be able to begin the process again. and to repair some of the damage that's been done. And that requires going, for example, the Haggis invited the community to the Indigenous Peoples Day on the Inti Shosum on the 21st. That's an invitation to everybody to attend, you know, and these are the things that we need to be doing, is repairing relationships at this point.
Korolek.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Medina. So I think you've laid out a very common sense, practical suggestion for council today. I want to thank you for that. As some of you may be aware, I've sat on the working group. I helped create those recommendations. At that time, I believed in them, and I still do. I think we're repairing relationships between our city and Claude. We also are, I think, needing to repair relationships on our council, within our community, and doing things that help bring people along with us. And I'm incredibly grateful to all the community members who want to work with us on reconciliation. And I'm aware that some folks aren't as ready as others, and trying to figure out how we bring our community along with us is what I struggle with today. I love it. I love all of you. I love this community. I'm also an Indigenous human person, not of the Claude Nation, but a different one. And I think it's incredibly important that in our country, in our province, in our city, that we do have conversations that talk about history that was not recorded appropriately in the past because it was left out. And to rely on historical writings that deliberately left pieces of our history out and call that the only thing to listen to is to perpetuate that problem, right? And so we do need to broaden our learnings and our history. We do need to acknowledge that there were an entire race of people here long before the settlers came. And those folks had a rich culture, a rich history that none of us know much about. And I think everybody can realize that, yes, that's true. I don't know much about that. And I love that people are, and I want people to come and share their willingness to do that work with us. I think that's a perspective that we all need to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Well, thank you very much. On our list today is Will Van Delft, representing the Townsite Triangle Gardens.
Are you the techie? I'm going to put up photo number 1. Thank you. Honorable Mayor, fellow councillors, thank you for this opportunity to present our delegation to you. We would like to discuss the Triangle Gardens in Townsite. First, a bit of history. You see on the monitor there a photograph by Rod LeMay, and by the looks of that new vehicle, it was around 1952. That looks like a Pontiac to me. Anyway, back in the day, this strip of land next to Marine Avenue and Ash Street to Dogwood Street operated as a nursery by the mill ownership to landscape the Townsite homes that were being constructed in the 1920s and 30s. When the mill management began to sell off the Townsite houses to private ownership, they decided to give this Triangle Garden property to the city. At that time, the city was reluctant to take on extra responsibility of maintaining the gardens. They decided to offer the gardens to the Townsite Heritage Society. more reluctance from the Heritage Society to take on what seemed like a considerable challenge, they also turned down this offer. Soon, cooler heads prevailed, and a three-party agreement was created for the city to own the property and for the Heritage Society to look after the gardens with volunteers. The local union agreed with this arrangement. This agreement has lasted for a few decades through various administrations and was renewed a few times. Unfortunately, the three-party agreement has lapsed, and today there is no current agreement. So we would like to propose that a new agreement to maintain the Triangle Gardens be drawn up so volunteers can continue to work in the gardens. This is important to all of us because with all the staff changes that the city is experiencing, there is a risk that important relationships may begin to fall to the wayside and disappear. We would like to have this council assign a staff member to meet with members of the Townsite Heritage Society Board and the CUPE shop steward to create an updated volunteer agreement. As a volunteer, I'm proud to be part of a team that looks after the gardens with periodic work parties. There are, however, some situations that come our way which are too great for us to manage. 2, please. 6 months ago, the provincial highways contractor removed 5 large trees along Marine Avenue as they were deemed to be hazardous. They left us with the stumps. So now we need your help. We've approached the Community Forest Fund and applied for a grant to grind the stumps down and install lights to complete the Manager's Row lighting project that was recently partially installed. Once this project is complete, it will connect the sidewalk lights with Patricia Theatre and become a safe and popular walking route after a movie. This will also tie into the Townsite walking tours hosted in the summer months. We hope you will support this project. Thank you for listening.
Media.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Van Delft. I was curious, you mentioned that there was a previous agreement that is no longer active or current. Do you know offhand when the previous agreement lapsed? Was it sometime in the recent periods, or?
I have been looking for information for the actual written agreements, and I've not been able to find any in the heritage files or in other people's memory, but I know around 1992 and from there till about 2000 that agreements were in place.
It was definitely signed, not a handshake.
I think if you look in the archives, that there is discussions at a council level of that agreement taking place and existing. So it requires a little bit of research, but the information's there.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair to staff, I'm just wondering if there is any verbal awareness of what you could share with us on this, and if not today, could we ask that you verbally report back to us at a further date?
Through the Chair to Council, first of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Van Delft. He and I had a chance to sit down on this matter. I think there is evidence that there was some agreement. We don't have a copy like Ms. Van Delft stated. However, moving forward, regardless of whether it's a copy or not, Mr. Bretzlaff has already started some of the work that Ms. Van Delft has asked for your help on. So I'd like to assure you that staff are already starting down this pathway with engaging with CUPE and seeing what we can come up with to facilitate the request and to support the work of the volunteers. So I don't know if Mr. Bretzlaff has anything else to add.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Will Venda. I actually think that's amazing that you've come forward and asked for a solution that seems really practical for the Triangle Gardens. I'm pretty excited about that idea. I'd love to find out more from staff how we can get this on an agenda and a report. Do you need a motion of that kind, or should we just ask for it to be on an agenda in the future?
Through the Chair, staff are proceeding to look into this and bring something forward. I mean, you can make a formal motion if that would be more assurance to the Ratepayers Association. But we've actually started some of the conversations with QP to try and find out what the history is, if they have a copy, and regardless of whether there exists a copy, the fact it's moving forward, there's a need for that conversation to take place. So I guess I provide you our word that we've started this, and that I think the key is that once we have something drafted and we have a sense of the implications, that we come back to you for your consideration if there's resource implications beyond what would be the usual operational, I think would be fair to say, because of course that's something we do have to balance.
Okay, so I'm going to assume we don't need a motion at this point in time, but Mr. Van Delft, if you in the future feel like we should put it on an agenda and need us to do something for you, maybe just let us know again, because it seems like it's going to work out already to work with staff to do that.
Thank you very much. Available anytime.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I remember being at the Triangle Gardens with you.
Yes.
And the very active group that were out there also. My only question is, have you asked the residents in Powell River or business people if they would like to contribute to make this happen?
And the short answer is no. That's not been the avenues that I've used.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. It sounds like staff is telling us they have this in hand and they're going to come back to us with some solutions.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure if we need to, we might make a motion to speed that along.
I'm available.
Thank you. Oh, that brings us item 4, correspondence. Any comments from anybody about any of the correspondence? Mayor Wasno.
Thank you, Chair. In commenting on the correspondence, I will follow the lead of councillors and include some personal and family history. The letters request that the mayor show leadership. This is also a key component of the mayor's responsibility as outlined in the community charter. So I plan to do this by laying out an approach to resolving divisiveness in our community. Leadership comes in many different forms, depending on whether you live in a democracy or a dictatorship. I grew up in a democracy, but I was also fortunate to learn about leadership from mentors who grew up in a dictatorship and escaped to Canada, where they found freedom of expression. Dr. Valenta, my doctoral thesis advisor, emphasized the opportunities that exist for inquisitive minds in a democracy that do not exist in a dictatorship. Here we have the ability to read the works of many authors and determine for ourselves which ones make the most sense. This was essential in allowing me to answer questions during my thesis defense. I carried this belief throughout my career, and it was the reason the External Affairs Department asked me in 1990 if I would host a delegation of Polish MPs and senators who were in Canada to learn how they could best transition to a democracy. Over the next 2 years, I volunteered with Polish government and assisted in getting them documents to allow them the transition that they all hope for. I was honored with an invitation to sit on the floor of their parliamentary assembly while they debated the powers of their president. They liked having a president, but they were still very nervous about the powers that could happen. The president thought he could be a dictator. With democracy, people in Poland accepted with much happiness that they could read books and to listen to rock and roll music that had been previously banned. This experience helped me realize that a key benefit of democracy is the ability to form opinions after hearing and reading multiple of different opinions. My last visit to Poland, I was honored with a private visit with Pope John Paul II, which included a ride on his Popemobile. Many of you know that he was a Polish citizen. I was also made at that time an honorary member of Solidarity. Based on this and other experiences, I believe the divisiveness that exists among some residents of Powell River is due to the fact that they are unable to differentiate between their opinions and truth. They feel compelled to demand that others embrace their truth. An example is the criticism I received when I accepted a book at a previous council meeting. This was interpreted falsely that I endorsed and was promoting the book. Had the individuals shown me the courtesy of contacting me, they would have known their concern was unfounded. But unfortunately, the ability to have an open mind is becoming a scarce commodity. And that is what is required to move through the divisiveness in our community. In correspondence, writers have expressed a concern that I'm a racist and do not respect or understand Indigenous history and the advice that students in residential schools experienced. In order to understand my response to these allegations, it is important for me to share my experience as an altar boy who was raised by a single mother who had to work full-time as a teacher to support her family of 5. This made me an easy target for a pedophile priest who made me swear to God that I would not tell anyone, especially my mother, what he was doing. After months of abuse, my poor performance as an altar boy triggered concerns with the nuns that I was being abused and the pedophile was transferred to another parish. My survival of that experience was largely due to the mothers of my school friends who must have sensed what was happening because of the dramatic change in my behavior. And without saying anything, found ways to help me heal. Notwithstanding this experience, I somehow remained open-minded about the church and had a lifelong friendship with Father Mike McCaffrey, who taught me leadership and training when I was in grade 11. Father Mike, as you may know, is well known as having performed the marriage ceremony for the Gretzkys in Edmonton. He also championed my ask for an apology from the Archbishop of Edmonton, which resulted in an apology. So yes, I understand the impact of abuse, especially abuse by people in authoritarian positions. Writers have also suggested that I am a racist and do not understand and respect Indigenous people. Again, this is false. Since 1987, I've met Indigenous leaders across Canada in different roles. In 2008, Susan O'Brien and myself started the first national scholarship program for Indigenous high school students. Each recipient spent 1 week doing science or engineering research, the faculty member at one of 10 Canadian universities. All of their expenses were paid. From 2008 to 2021, Susan and I volunteered our time as the CEO and project manager of the foundation that oversaw the programs and did all of the fundraising. During that time, we raised over $10 million in cash and kind. During this time, over 550 Indigenous students from across Canada attended the program. 15 of these students were from Brooks High School in Powell River. Before a student was accepted, Susan or myself spoke with the students' parents, grandparents, or guardians to answer any questions they had about the program or safety concerns. For each program, we arranged for students to spend time at the Indigenous Center and talk with elders and support staff. We also arranged for a celebration dinner on the Thursday night where students were invited to share their experiences. In 2011, we renamed the foundation and the program we had started to the Verna J. Kirkness Foundation in recognition of Dr. Kirkness' achievements in champion Indigenous education. Dr. Kirkness also taught at a residential school, and she shared with us her knowledge and understanding of residential schools. From 2008 to 21, I attended a Kirkness program every year, met all of the students, and often jointly presented certificates to the students with Dr. Kirkness. In summary, we can start on a path to end divisiveness by focusing on positives rather than negatives, opening our minds to hear other opinions, and in doing so, demonstrate a willingness to work together to the benefit of our great city. Thank you.
What else? Don't see anyone else, so I've got some responses to make. There's a couple of letters in here that require resignation of a number of council members or myself individually. I want to talk to those. The first one is from Rebecca Alcock, who calls for 5 councillors to resign and makes various accusations, including being divisive. I want to point out that council has done one thing about the name change since we were elected in 2022. And that one thing was to do what many people are asking us to do, is to pass a motion that says we'll work towards an opinion poll in the 2026 election. So people will have an opportunity to say whether they want a name change or not. All of the delegations and all of the people approaching council and all of the noise that's been being made about that have been a reaction to that from the public. It's not the council that created it. It's the delegations that were coming here have created that. The delegations say they represent everybody in the public. And the fact is that's not the case. There are a large number of people who want to see a name change, and there's a large number of people who don't. But no one voice represents everybody. I don't intend to resign because of the letter from Rebecca Alcock asking for 5 councillors to resign. The logic of that is that in a democracy, if 5 councillors disagree with 2 councillors, who all have a political right to hold an opinion, that the 5 should resign and the 2 should remain. I would suggest most democratic organizations work on the majority rules example, where if somebody was going to resign, and I don't say anybody should, if someone was going to, you'd think it would be the minority, and then at least you could carry on with the leadership. There's one from Lisa Lamacraft. In the kit that demands my resignation because I am fighting, it says, too much for the desire of the Tla'amin Nation and not enough for the individual residents of the city of Powell River. There is no rule that says because the Tla'amin Nation achieves a goal or a dream that somehow has to be a loss for residents of the city. It's possible when you work in a collaborative operation for both sides to win, for both sides to find themselves in a stronger and better community. That's what I believe in, and I'm going to keep fighting for it. So I'm not going to succumb to that request. And those are not the only two requests the council has seen. We've seen quite a number that come in calling for these 5 particular councillors to resign. Then we got ones like this that comes to me with, frankly, it's got language that I couldn't read to my grandchildren, and I wouldn't read to you here today, and talks about me and what the individual thinks of me in the most foul language I've ever seen in what should be a professional piece of communication. I'm not going to resign because of that. And I'm not going to resign because of the harassment that people like that are doing to my family. Not going to happen. I'm going to continue fighting for what I believe in, which I believe is in the best interest of all of the residents of Powell River. So that's my response to these. Pat Martin's got a good letter in there that asks us to adopt a code of conduct. Council has had 2 workshops in the last 2 weeks working towards that, and we'll be getting some solutions, hopefully, coming forward in the next few weeks. That's my response. Anyone else have anything to say? Then we can, I don't see any hands. We can go on to, oh, Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, since we're referring to all the correspondence, I first want to respond to Mayor Wassenau's delivery. First of all, Mayor, Your Worship, I want to say how sorry I am to hear about the experience that you had as a youth. And those are things that never leave one individual that has had to endure that type of treatment. I feel sorry that this has happened. It's happened to so many. And it's just a sad plight. Secondly, when the mayor was speaking, he referred to open mind. I think that's something that's very, very important. When we sit up here, our job is to have an open mind. And I've said it before, when we're dealing with each and every issue that comes forward, I'm usually the last one to speak for that very reason, because I want to hear all the wisdoms that are expressed before I make any comment from myself, my heart, or my brain. And I want to hear from the residents whom I am elected to represent at this table, the citizens of Powell River. That's who I am here to represent and do a job for. So I hear what the mayor is saying. And I think that's something we all have to come to grips with when we're dealing with something that is, I hate to say it, been thrown at us from left field. That's what we're dealing with. And you can look at all the books. You can look at all the history. And there is new information coming forward all the time that I saw this weekend. And I'm not going to make reference to it because I would get myself in trouble. But there's new information coming forward on where the name of Powell River and Powell Lake and Powell River came from. So do we have all the answers here? Absolutely not. And as we progress down this road to, I hope, 2026, when we visit the situation with an opinion poll so the citizens can have a direct say, we'll have a better understanding of where we are in terms of this issue. But for now, I kept saying, and I said it last Friday when we had our meeting, talking about our new bylaw proposals. our new code of conduct. This should be set aside. We shouldn't continue to be bringing it up in this chamber every 2 weeks, because everybody just keeps reliving the same thing. And it just keeps festering and growing and getting worse. The division grows, not subsides, which is what I wanted to do. Because I can tell you, public, we have far greater issues in this city right now to deal with than this one that we are presently talking about. I'll leave it at that. I won't go to get into the mud, but that's something I would like everybody to think about. Let's grow up. Let's hold our head high and move forward and deal with the issues that are on this table that are far greater than a name change right now. Thanks for listening.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to maybe reaffirm some of my own views in response to some of the letters that, I agree with Councillor Palm in that our community is facing a lot of big challenges. I do believe that reconciliation and repairing relationship is one of those important matters that we need to address. And doing so, in my view, is of the best interest of our community. It's part of one of the reasons I ran for office and what I was very open about when I ran. And as Councillor Doubt shared on his own accord, I have no plans to resign, and I look forward to continuing this work among all the other important pieces of work that we are held to govern as elected leaders of the community. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let folks out there who are reading the correspondence and listening to Council try to move forward on a number of fronts know that because the conversation is happening on a regular basis doesn't mean we're not doing our work as well. We are moving forward on a number of fronts, even if it's not the subject of delegations that come here to Council each and every time. Our work is happening, and we are focused on trying to do that in a good way. I don't believe that if another government, common or otherwise, brings something to us that is of concern of theirs, that treating it with less than respect is how we should proceed. So Common Nation is another government here in the area that we share, and working together with them on economic development or any front is of utmost importance for all of our futures, and it's in the best interest of our community to do so to the best of our abilities. I would disagree with saying the issue is from left field. I think it was of great importance to the nation that brought it to us, and I don't think we should be trying to say that it's of anything different than something important. So I'm hopeful that the community recognizes that there's a lot of passion about this subject, and we, the council, are working hard at managing all of our city matters. This is also part of how we move forward in good relations with the Common Nation. We do have a community accord. It is a living document. It probably does need more growth and understanding and better conversations between us. The open mind we all talk about means that maybe you understand a perspective that isn't really yours. And so I try to do that on a regular basis, and I hope that everybody else in the city does as well. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our item number 5 on the agenda, which is reports for decision. Number 5 is development permit 382 and development variance permit 281, Crown Pacific Development Corporation, Lot 1, Alberta Avenue, Evo Multifamily Residential Development. What does staff have to tell us about that exciting development?
Thank you very much for having me here. I'll try not to remake the wheel on this one. This committee has seen information about this project twice now. In quick background, the developer for this proposal, which is a 40-unit apartment complex, has now brought forward comprehensive development permit drawings for approval, which would allow them to move on and make building permit submission. They would like to get construction underway, I believe, as quickly as possible. Once staff undertook a comprehensive review of the drawings, we identified the need for one more variance with respect to the location of on-site parking spaces. And so you're getting a combination of a development permit and development variance permit application today. As a quick background, this property is adjacent to, or actually sandwiched in between, the MCC thrift shop building and the Georgia Center multi-united commercial building. It's got frontage both on Franklin Avenue and Alberta Avenues. It is located just south of Field Street and north of Glacier. In 2020, the previous property owner rezoned the property to RM4, which is our multiple family residential 4 zone, and subdivided it off from the existing Georgia Center commercial building. In December of last year, this council granted development variance permit 279, which was to permit increased building height and a reduction in the number of on-site parking spaces. As this committee will recall, the increased building height was to allow the developer to take advantage of the density bonusing provisions in the zoning bylaw, which was 15% of the units in the development being secured as affordable rental. And in February of 2024, a housing agreement bylaw was adopted by council that secured 15% of those units as affordable rentals. As an update to this committee just this morning, the housing agreement covenant securing those 6 units was signed by mayor and CAO and forwarded off to the developer's legal counsel for registration. So that has been secured. This is just mapping that gives you the surrounding context as to its location, which we've already discussed. The property itself actually has a pretty significant slope change from what staff consider the front on Franklin Avenue to the back up on Alberta. This is a side view of the building. The ground level, as it will appear from Franklin Avenue, is going to house 29 of the 50 parking stalls underground, with a ground level lobby, 50 bicycle parking space, as well as an over 600 square foot multi-purpose fitness center for the use of the residents. From Alberta Avenue on the high side, it will have an exterior entrance as well and present just as the 5 floors of residential housing. So from a form and character perspective, staff did compare the proposal to 2 different development permit areas in the city's Sustainable Official Community Plan, Development Permit Area 1 and 2. The development proposed is for 40 units, ranging from micro or studio suites up to 2-bedroom and den units. As part of its comprehensive review of the development in relation to our development guidelines, we took into consideration guidelines with respect to area of siting and orientation of buildings, view impact, facades and roof lines, use of exterior materials, landscaping, and usable outdoor spaces for residents, and finally parking and vehicular access. I won't go down and break down the minutiae of staff's analysis of each of those areas, as I think the staff report is fairly comprehensive in that regard, but happy to provide any clarification. With respect to parking and vehicular access specifically, though, this is a site plan provided by the applicant, and with respect to parking spaces, the zoning bylaw has some stipulations that require open parking spaces to be located out of the front setback. That is generally from an aesthetic perspective, so you're not actually busying up, let's say, the front of a multifamily residential development with an open expanse of multiple parking spaces that could make traversing that parking lot to access the front entrance of the building a little bit more difficult, could actually shield or hide that lobby and entrance from the public sidewalk over an expanse of parking spaces. In this situation, There's only 7 parking spaces highlighted in yellow there that are actually proposed to be located within the front setback. We've got, as I mentioned, 29 parking spaces that are not going to be visible from the street at all, as they're taking advantage of the property's slope differential and being located underground. And 22 surface parking stalls that are located at what staff are deeming the back or of the building, which is fronting Alberta Avenue, as the main lobby entrance is going to be accessed off of Franklin. So the variance permit with respect to staff's analysis and council's consideration of the actual impact of it has only to do with those 7 parking stalls highlighted in yellow, 2 of which are the disability spaces that are the minimum that the developer must provide. And as you can see, they are located as a fairly short distance and a fully paved, accessible, traversable distance from the parking area to the front lobby entrance doors. With respect to impact of citing these parking spaces in the front setback, while the staff report identifies that final landscaping plans have not been established, the developer is still working with planning staff and engineering staff to sort out what will be able to suitably shield these parking spaces from view from the sidewalk, but also take into consideration some fairly proximal and shallow underground city services that we don't want to disrupt. Staff feel that we're talking about 7 parking spaces. There's many practical reasons as to why they should be located here versus abutted up against the front of the building, possibly obscuring that front entrance from the sidewalk. And they should be suitably shielded and bounded by that outdoor usable space in the northwest corner, as well as some boulevard landscaping. So from the staff's perspective, we are putting both the development permit and the variance permit in front of this committee, with recommendations that staff are directed to undertake the statutory notice requirements associated when council is considering a variance to a zoning bylaw, and that once the statutory notice period, which is a mail out, is completed, staff would return both development permit 382 and development variance permit 281 back to a future meeting of council for consideration to issue. I did move through it fairly quickly, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair.
Always reliable.
Ms. Pikesh, could you let me know if the main lobby entrance is intended to be on Alberta, whether there would be handicap parking on that section near that main lobby entrance? Or is that not part of the plan? It seems like the handicap parking off of Franklin is maybe not located on the level where the main entrance would be.
Through the chair, if I wasn't clear, the front lobby entrance is off Franklin, which is where the disability parking spaces are also located. Alberta on the high side is the back of the building.
Okay, you did indicate in your presentation that that's where they intended to have the main lobby entrance.
Okay, apologies. It's it's in the report, but I apologize for that oversight. Yeah. Thank
you. I don't see any other hands, but what's occurred to me in your presentation is the question is how does planning determine which is the front and which is the back when we have a property that goes all the way between two streets? Is that determined by basically where the front and the back orientation of other buildings on the street are, or what do you use to make that determination?
Through the chair, that authority to determine when you have a double fronting lot, which one is going to be considered the frontage, is delegated to the approving officer within the zoning bylaw. In this situation, the approving officer is the Director of Planning Services, and based upon looking at the development proposal, Franklin Avenue being where the main lobby entrance to the building was going to be located was the from our perspective, obvious choice to choose as the frontage of the building.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Isaacson, you had a question?
No, I was going to move the recommendations, given doesn't look like they're.
Okay, and we've got 3 basic recommendations that the committee can handle, so I think it might be a good idea to read them out so we know which ones we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one. I move that members of the committee direct staff to give notice in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act of Council's intention to consider issuance of Development Variance Permit 281 to vary City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100-2006 by allowing parking spaces to be located within the front setback.
Seconder, Mayor Wasno. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I can continue. I move that members of the committee refer Development Variance Permit 281 to a future meeting of council for consideration to issue following the statutory notice period.
Seconded by Councillor Almeida. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously.
And finally, I move that members of the committee refer Development Permit 382 to a future meeting of council for consideration to issue, subject to an approval of a final landscape plan and receipt of the associated landscape security deposit to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services.
Seconder, Councillor Alameda. Any discussion on number 3? Councillor Southcott.
Thank you. Just a quick question. It seems obvious, but I want just to be absolutely clear. On page 5 of the report, it mentions that, which as you mentioned, Ms. Fukesh, about the landscaping not being finalized, that be delegated to the Director of Planning Services. And I just want to be absolutely clear that this number 3 recommendation includes that, because this language sounds really familiar to me, and it sounded like that was an anomaly, but maybe just a little bit of confusion in my own mind. But yes.
Through the chair, oftentimes in larger multifamily or commercial developments, landscape plan may be in, but costing may not be in to establish the amount of the security. And so oftentimes staff do ask, in the interest of expediting the process, that securing that deposit is delegated to the Director of Planning Services. In this case, as conversations are ongoing with staff on an operational and a maintenance level, we're looking for that same delegated authority to the director to approve a final landscape plan and associated costing. So it's familiar language to you, as it's been our standard course on multiple other projects where we don't have all of our landscaping finalized, but the balance of the project is ready to go in front of council.
Those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 6.1 is CWalk update from the Director of Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Chair, members of council. I'm going to provide an update to, the CWalk. Back in 2022, a storm surge that coincided with a king tide resulted in significant damage to the CWalk. Staff have since brought the trail to a rough but usable standard by applying crushed rock to smooth out the walking surface and dealing with major obstacles. We brought on balanced environmental services to provide environmental services related to the preliminary design and regulatory approval of proposed shoreline enhancement works along the CWalk. And subsequently, we engaged with Aquila Archaeology to prepare an archaeological review in accordance with the Heritage Conservation Act. Aquila currently holds a multi-assessment permit, a MAP, that is in effect until the end of 2025. We recently had an extension on that permit. This allows the city to maintain infrastructure while archaeological studies take place. So the MAP also provides delegated authority to Aquila to approve works on behalf of the province to meet the requirements of the Heritage Conservation Act. The initial review completed by Aquila did not identify any impacts to known archaeology. So since that time, we've mapped out the entire seawalk, and I have identified areas of concern. The next step is to put out a final design, construction tender package, and project management work through a public tender process. The successful bidder will prepare the final design to rectify geotechnical slope stability concerns, as well as address any environmental and fisheries considerations. So once that is completed, a notice of intent will be sent to Claudia and the archaeology branch prior to the commencement of the work. And then that work will be put through a public tender process in June of this year, and with construction beginning in September of 24, with a projected completion date of the fall of 2024. So if there's any questions to that update.
Yeah, just a quick question. In your timeline, there's a series of like seasons or dates when things happen. And so, for example, archaeological review says summer 2022. I suspect that it might have taken longer than just a few months for a process to be completed. Or I'm just wondering if those dates are like the beginning or the end, or when substantive work was done.
That was the end of the work when the review was submitted. So it was, yeah, it took a period of time. There was some issues with some, I guess, different guidance with the ARC branch that skewed that timeline. But in the end, Aquila was quite responsive and provided that initial review.
So that was done 2022, and then the biological and environmental report was done fall 2023.
That's right.
Any other questions? Councillor Palm.
Yeah, just for the public's information through the chair, final implications as far as finance goes. Mr. Bertig, we started with a budget of 800,000. We're down to, after the work we've already done, down to 762,000 change. Is that going to be enough to complete the project?
We feel it's adequate at this time, but the final straw will be once those prices come in.
Thank you.
Councillor Isaacson again.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the map that Aquila has allows for maintaining infrastructure. What does that mean?
So if we have any emergency infrastructure, such as a water main repair, that type of thing, then we can carry out those repairs under what used to be called a blanket permit.
See any other questions? Looks like Councillor Palm.
Just one comment through the chair, and I'm glad to see the citizen that's been phoning me and emailing me on this topic for a number of years now is in the gallery to hear firsthand where we're at. Thank you, Chair.
Just a comment on my own. It seems that the schedule seems to be accelerating really quickly between now and August. There's a lot of things to do, so hope you can stick to that time frame.
Yeah,
we're get construction going in September.
We're on it aggressively. Yeah, we understand the importance of the seawalk to the citizens, and would like to carry on with that work.
My recollection is November is about the time it got torn apart in the big atmospheric river. So hopefully it's done and strong by then.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next one, and don't go away very far, because the next one is another one of your projects, the airport runway rehabilitation project.
The airport, yes. So provide an update of the airport. In my opinion, it's moving along right on schedule and essentially as planned. We have a few photos here of what occurred last week. This is the May 30th the second course of asphalt, and this is on taxiway Alpha. And then on the same day, there's an aerial view of the final second lift of 09. So that's the west end closer to Manson. And the pavers had about three more passes to do when this photo was taken. And this is an aerial view showing the overall, where the entire runway would be paved and landscape, and you can see to the east end some of the hydroseeding that had taken place. And then once the paving was completed, we had the line markings painted just before the inclement weather occurred. So there's the markings on 2-7, the east end, and then the 09 end on near Manson. This is runway 09, the west end, where they're preparing topsoil for final seeding. And then this is the graded strip. So everything that is adjacent to the paved strip has to be to specified slopes and ditches, and no major deviations from the asphalt. One thing that I'd like to say at this time is we completed an obstacle limitation surface survey a few weeks ago, and found that there was a few trees that penetrated that obstacle limitation surface, and we worked with Claudia and their forestry group, and we would like to send out kudos to them because they were very, very accommodating in a very timely manner to either top or drop trees that penetrate in the OLS, not only to the north of the strip, but also to the east end. And very thankful that they were able to carry that work out for us. Thank you. And then so this is, they're conducting some more topsoil work on Bravo, and yeah, that's all the photos that I have. So how close are they? They're very close. Construction, all the final topsoil and grading should be completed by the end of day tomorrow. We have provided Transport Canada with our airport operations manual, AOM. So that went to Transport Canada on Friday, May 31st. And then today, the audit report stating that everything is complying with the TP312 specifications. That report, as well as the map of what is physically in the airport, was submitted to Transport Canada this afternoon. So now we are waiting. We're working with Transport Canada so that they can provide us with their certification, and we're looking for that response within the next couple days. So we should be able to open the airport and runway at least by Monday the 10th. Any questions?
Isaacson.
You mentioned on schedule, I'm wondering how the rain impacted things. I know I had a lot of questions from people about, like, how's it going? Because we've had some pretty torrential rains.
Yeah, over this past weekend, they lost, they were limited to the work that they could do just because of the saturated soils. Sunday was limited work. So they lost a couple days. They were hoping to finish on the 3rd. That date has been pushed out to the 5th because of those conditions. A lot of work they could carry on still with, as long as it wasn't torrential rains. But the paving and the paint markings, those ones were very related to good weather, and we were fortunate enough to be able to carry those two out.
Okay, Cindy, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I recall at one point in time that the proposed date for reopening was going to be June 9th. And now I'm hearing June 10th. Have we impacted the operators or Pacific Coastal Air? Have we been keeping them in the loop? Are they, because they sell all their tickets in advance, right? So
we're in regular conversations with Pacific Coastal, and what we said is that we would get certification to open the runway June 9th, and the first flights could come in on June 10th is what we're proposing. What we're hoping for is that we could hopefully open up the runway earlier, but we're awaiting Transport Canada to give us the nod.
Okay, so they haven't planned flights before that, and it doesn't impact them. They're on board with the plan. And then my other question is, Mr. Arthur Arnold was saying he needed folks to be able to fly in and out for Prisma. Is he also being kept in the loop?
Yeah, we're notifying them as well too that they're looking for, I think their first flights where their
12
personnel would be coming in was the 12th or 13th. So they've been notified as well. I believe just last week we provided them an email response. But with Pacific Coastal, we're definitely, it's every 2 days we're in conversation with them, if not more, as well as providing them daily updates to the goings on at the airport.
And then my final comment is, thank you so much. Wonderful work, and I'm happy to see the light shining just a few days down the road.
Thank you.
Powell.
Through the chair, Mr. Pertig, I just want to say congratulations to you and your entire team. There are so many variables that go into a project like this, weather being the big one, and who you're working with on the ground, extending hours, and all the rest that's gone into this project. I just want to thank you because there was a lot of apprehension from Pacific Coastal at the outset, how long, blah, 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 and everybody's got their wringing their hands, and very happy to see this is on time, on schedule, and probably, hopefully, on budget.
Yes, it's on schedule and within the overall budget. We're there. Yes, it was an aggressive timeline, and all groups came together to make it happen. Tetra Tech, Upland, city staff, Pacific Coastal. The list goes on.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping we get one more report.
One more. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up for questions, so then we'll go right into community engagement reports from councillors, and see Councillor Alameda down there at the beginning of the alphabet. Would you like to start first?
Sounds good, Chair. Thank you very much. Last week I had a chance to partake in the tourism board meeting as my liaison role, and also Townsite Heritage has continued to keep me in the loop with their meetings with Townsite Heritage Society. So always fun to partake in those meetings, and I heard a little bit about the Townsite, the Triangle Gardens that Mr. Van Delft brought forward today. So I'm sure the Heritage Society will be excited to hear some news moving forward along those. On the weekend, had a chance to partake in Inclusion's 70th anniversary celebrations, which was great to see, and a great celebration that they had, and amazing to think that Inclusion is actually older than the city. So, because they started in '54. And on Sunday, had a chance to view or watch the year-end recital for the Powell River Highland Dancers organization and catch a few friends in action. So a great group of kids there, and great performances overall. So always a good time for those who like to see kids perform, to put that on your calendar for next year maybe. And then this afternoon, a few of us had a chance to get preview of the soon to open down the road Resource Recovery Center. And it's still a construction site, but it was great to see the improvements from previous year when we had a tour and to get a better understanding of that facility that will help us divert a lot of materials from the waste to other recycling options down the road.
Thank you, Chair. Looking back a couple of weeks since our last community engagement reports, a couple of members of council went over to Cumberland to tour their fire hall, which was a really fantastic learning opportunity. I would say was skeptical at first because I thought, well, Cumberland's actually quite a bit smaller than us, so how does their building meet our needs? And I was really impressed and was there with Chief Drakely was there as well, and he provided some really great insight on what the needs of the fire department actually are. And so obviously there was a previous motion of council for staff to report back to us on the future of the fire hall, and we'll be hearing about that more in the future. But it was nice to see an example of a modern fire hall that can maybe be affordable or more affordable and meet the needs of our esteemed firefighters. Was at Garden Club last week, and there was a great panel on food security, and I learned two things that I wanted to share of upcoming items of info. One, for those of you who are familiar with the Skookum Gleaners or the Skookum Society, they have previously helped glean trees or nut trees, fruit trees, etc., that people didn't want to deal with themselves on their own property, and they had a bit of a hiatus, but they've elected a new board of directors, and they will be getting up and running this year, I believe, starting this month. And so what this means is if you have fruit, vegetables, nuts, any sort of food on your property that you do not have the capacity to deal with, you can reach out to the gleaners, skookumfood.ca. They will come with volunteer pickers. They will pick the food, and then it's split. I believe it's split three ways. 1/3 goes back to the homeowner, 1/3 goes to the food bank, and 1/3 goes to the pickers. And so everybody benefits from those contributions. And so great opportunity for people who maybe are not able to manage the fruit trees on their property and want to be bear aware in particular. Another thing I learned about upcoming at VIU this weekend is a food systems conference. That's June 8th from 12:30 to 5:30. It's free, no registrations required. Anyone who's interested in food security, farming, food systems, and it's an unconference. That means there's no agenda. People come and indicate what topics they are interested in talking about or learning about, and then they bring people together who are also interested in those topics. And so if there's something of particular interest that a resident is wanting to discuss, then they can do that. There was a food systems research that was done quite a few years ago by resident Vanessa Sparrow as a result of the Food Policy Council, I believe it was called. And they're looking at maybe doing a short session to update some of that research. So I think it's going to be a great afternoon for those of you who are interested in food in this region. I attended the flag raising for Pride Month. We have a lovely Pride flag flying outside City Hall for the month of June, and was happy to hear some opening remarks from the mayor and just reinforcing our council's previous motion last year and our dedication to inclusivity. There's a number of events happening this month. If you are hungry and you can leave right now, go to Shingle Mill. There's a drag show with local resident with Connie Smudge. Attended the CAT team meeting yesterday, trying to grapple with some operational opportunities there. And always great to see collaboration among a variety of partners at those meetings that are working in harm reduction. I attended a webinar earlier today on RCMP municipal police agreements and the authorities and responsibilities of municipalities. That was really great learning. There was an associate deputy minister responsible for police services and as well as a board member from UBCM, and so learned a lot about the municipal responsibilities that are afforded through the Police Act. And one thing, there's a current budget split of 70-30, or a cost sharing agreement, 70-30 between the municipality of our size pays 70%, and the whereas if we hit the 15,000 people mark, we pay 90%. And so that's for officers, but for support staff, we bear 100% of those costs unless there is unless those staff are doing work in support of provincial or federal work. And so I checked in with staff earlier today saying, just making sure we're getting our money back for things that are done in service of provincial and federal. And so I asked in the webinar, what does that mean? You know, what sort of work might count in terms of federal or provincial? And they said if there are members of the detachment who are provincial in nature, so for example, those who are serving a regional district would count, that the support services should be cost shared, referencing the fact that some of those services are provincial and are serving outside of the municipal boundaries. So I think the short answer is yes, we do that. Maybe there's a little bit of finessing that can be done, or affirmation that it's being done to the right level, but staff are aware of that and do consider that when they're doing finances. And then also took a tour of the Resource Recovery Center as it is today. One of the things that staff there wanted to highlight is to make sure that residents know that this is not a waste processing center. This is a transfer station. So everything that is brought in there is intended to leave. The waste that goes in there is shipped to Washington State. If it's household waste, if it's compost, or the organics goes to Seashelt. And then there are other recycling pieces that go to Richmond. And then there may be things that could be reused by people of this community, but everything that goes there is intended to go out. Garbage is not processed or repurposed there. It is an in and out facility. But yeah, great to see where they're at. And they will be, it sounds like, opening up to city trucks first, so that they get the practice of how it will work before there begins to be residents in the mix. And so looking forward to the time when our organics waste can start going there. And it looks like it should be happening this summer. That's the current date that they're talking about. And I look forward to eventually bringing my own recycling and waste there. That isn't covered by my household waste. Anyways, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did join council on a tour of the Cumberland Fire Hall, and I agree with Councillor Isaacson that it was very helpful in terms of thinking what could be done here in Powell River. I attended the annual cadet review. And congratulations to Dean Gerhardt, who was recognized for over 60 years of service in the community and the work that he's done with the Naval Cadets. I attended the Legion Candlelight Tribute at our cemetery, and it was quite moving to see the impact on the cemetery after all the candles had been lit. I also found out how difficult it is to light candles on a very windy day. Participated in North Island Sunshine Coast Advisory Committee meeting, and there is going to be an opportunity for Powell River to get good media coverage on any success story that we've had as a result of funding from this group. So I'll leave that in the hands of our CAO. I did have the privilege of raising the flag at the Pride Flag Day yesterday. Talked with citizens concerning the noise impact of illegal cutting of logs across the street from the Kiwanis village. And I was pleased to hear from staff that our bylaws and RCMP are well aware of this. Fortunately, they haven't been able to locate the individual that has been doing the chainsawing at 3 a.m, which has created a lot of angst for citizens of the Quanah village. And finally, I did talk with a family of a senior living in close proximity to the lift building on Joyce. And the family is continually concerned, especially with the hot days coming, that she feels very unsafe, so that she has to lock her doors and windows every night, and continually feels unsafe in her neighborhood. Thank you.
Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. Pretty much everything I've done over the past couple of weeks that I can recall, because I forgot my list, has already been mentioned. The Resource Recovery Center tour, it's very exciting that that is very close to coming online. And it'll be a significant upgrade in services and also opportunities from what we have had in the past. It was great to see a really healthy crowd at the Pride flag raising yesterday. Cumberland Fire Hall just mentioned that there was some talk about the possibility of there being cooperation between both the fire and BCEHS, and they had made provisions, so big possibility hopefully for that happening here. Just one more thing, and that is VIU and the city have an agreement working on a food program, and I attended an event out at Pat Hansen's farm. I think it's called Antabaca Farmer's Gate on the way to Lund. It's really good to see her farm, that farm, and a number of people there working with her, producing along with a few other really thriving small farms. It's small, but local food is healthy in this community, and I'm really glad to see that. And that's me. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I've had a quiet little time. I attended the Ferry Advisory Committee on behalf of the QRD on May 30th. I know that Councillor Palm sits there for the city, but I'll just highlight a couple of things that I noticed, and he can add to it. So we did talk about BC Ferry's newly starting up community engagement and the community prioritization panel system that they have created. So they're going to be having meetings like the one they had with us to try and get local priorities. And then chairs are going to go, the chairs of each of our ferry advisory committees is going to go to what they're calling a community prioritization panel. And they're going to be with the other ferry advisory committees trying to come up with a priority that includes everybody. And so the concern is that regional folks on the ferry advisory committees are not really getting to participate or speak to those forums. It's entirely reliant on the chair to do so. And those chairs are volunteers and not necessarily the elected officials who are chairs. So we weren't, as representatives of various organizations, entirely convinced that the process was designed to ensure that our interests were covered off appropriately. And so BC Ferries took that back and are hearing that we're not entirely comfortable with this process that they are calling a community prioritization panel. They are coming to do public meetings here in our community on July 3rd, and that will be the first one they've had since last September. They had one while we were all away at UECM. This next one will be on July 3rd here in our community. We did talk about all of our priorities on our list for our Ferry Advisory Committee. We had an excellent meeting. Our Ferry Advisory Committee is now called the Cathet Sunshine Coast Ferry Advisory Committee, and the thought was to try to be a little more representative of our region, because North Sunshine Coast, while clear to lots of people, didn't necessarily do it for us. So we changed the name of that, and BC Ferries agreed to that. We had attendance from Jesus John Hackett for the first time on our committee meetings, and he came and participated, and that was wonderful. So that was good. I also attended the CAT yesterday with some other colleagues of ours, Councillor Southcott and Councillor Isaacson. We had a Powell River Therapeutic Riding Association board meeting on May 15th. Where we went over a lot of things, including welcoming our new manager. We have a new manager, and her name is Sarah Ashcroft. We had a tour of the waste transfer station this morning, and I attended that. It's a very impressive station. I can't wait for it to open. Its key goal is to reduce the amount of waste that we have to transport out to landfills down in Washington. And so they'll be sorting that a little differently than they have been in the past, and making sure that environmentally it's got a higher standard, because it's fully contained in indoor areas instead of, and reducing all kinds of exposure to animals, and no leaching out. I wanted everyone to remember that it is Go By Bike Week, and I believe the Cathet Cycling Association has information about that on their website. And that's my report. Thank you.
Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Three short items here. One is I recently, very recently, had a tour of our harbors with the ex-wharfinger from days gone by the name of Mr. Jim Parsons, who happens to be the vice chair of our harbor committee. And that was very informative, very educational. A lot of the history that's gone on down there over the years. And that was a very enjoyable couple hours I spent with him. And he will be attending the next meeting of our harbor committee for council's reference. That'll be tomorrow night, 6:30 to 8:30 in the committee room. So if you're interested, that's the place to be, or online. Can they tune in online? Yes, they can. Thank you. And I want to just say thank you to Jessica for getting so many agenda items on our agenda, since the committee has taken it upon themselves to meet, 5 of them, and put all kinds of items forward. We've got about 10 or 12 items to deal with tomorrow night. We'll probably only get to a few of them in the time that is allotted. So we're going to focus in on the items that affect the operation this summer, and hopefully improve some of the service aspects of our harbors. Sport Hall of Fame. Sad to report that we have had items go missing out of the cabinet at the complex. Mr. Tavishir made me aware that he had found, or someone had found, a plaque in the woods out below the skateboard park. So I took that home, washed it, cleaned it up. It's back in the Sport Hall of Fame now. And we're looking at security and making sure that that is hopefully not going to happen again. And then the Ferry Advisory Committee, you know, we went over a lot of the items that were already on the previous agenda way back when, before we stopped meeting. That gave us an update. And one of the things that wasn't discussed that should be discussed at our next public meeting is in terms of service and capacity. When 226 happens and the World Cup comes to our province, the amount of people that are coming here, that is going to be put an horrendous load on our ferry system. So we need to start talking about that, and hopefully very staff have some suggestions, because it's not going to be pleasant times trying to travel that summer out of Powell River. So the next public meeting, as Councillor Elliott has suggested, will be July 3rd, and that is at Town Centre for the public. And I believe those public engagement is from 6:30 to 8:30. Is that correct, Councillor? I think I saw the.
It was 6 to 8, but they're going to, I thought it was 6 to 8, but they're going to put a public notice in the paper to let us know for sure.
Yeah, there'll be a notice in the paper, plus we'll update you at the mid-month council meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we have no unfinished business, no new business, so here we are at question period. I think everything I could say has been said at least sometimes 4 times already. But I don't think we need to hear it again. So we're at questions. Does anybody online have any questions? Anybody in the audience? And the audience has been getting smaller every minute. Any questions? The peak, Mr. Galinsky.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate also the Director of Infrastructure sticking around to answer a couple of questions for me. My first question, Chair, is with regard to the Seawalk update, and I'm wondering if the design includes things like heightening or other measures to prevent significant damage during another king tide should it occur.
Yeah, the final design will definitely look at things like wave trips or raising the actual seawalk or a buffer along the top edge to prevent that. But that'll come through the final design when we're working with the marine/geotechnical consultant.
I thank the director for that. My other question with regard to the Seawalk is I'm wondering about closure when construction is going on. Will the facility be closed in its entirety or portions of it? What's envisioned at this point, Chair?
We're anticipating at least closures of portions of the Seawalk while construction is happening, if not during the construction period, but it may be sections of the Seawalk that is closed at a time.
I'm wondering if the director can advise what the anticipated duration of construction would be.
Not at this point, not yet.
Okay, I thank you very much. Moving on to the airport rehabilitation project update. In a previous report, the Director of Infrastructure talked about delays in electrical, and so I'm wondering if an update on that can be provided for me.
Yes, the opening will be daylight operations only initially, as the delivery of the lighting fixtures is not anticipated until near the end of June, and then installation going into July.
What are the operating hours during daylight? I'm wondering what those might be through the chair.
Through daylight hours. So, currently we have approximately 15, 16 hours of daylight. So it would not impact Pacific Coastal's scheduled operations.
Perfect. I thank the director for those responses. Those are my questions, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Would somebody read our motion into a closed meeting? Councillor Isaacson?
Sure. I move that council move into a closed meeting to discuss matters covered by the community charter under sections 90 part 1, D, the security of the property of the municipality, E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm, and J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act.
I have a seconder. Councillor Southcott, any discussion? All those in favor of going into a closed meeting? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. So I think we'll take about 10 minutes here, and then we'll get down to our closed meeting work.